that basically it results in war or revolution. These are all foundational events, meaning that there is a complete reorganization of the foundational layer to society at the end of this. And it pits institutions against individuals. Saylor and his company are basically a super halving. I mean, they're taking coins off the market and they're not coming back, kids. So if you're out there and you're thinking if this is a good time to get Bitcoin, it is a good time because there isn't going to be that many left. You have a limited time in order to acquire the Bitcoin that you want to get before it begins to reach out of price. I'm just using it right now. And just as myself getting back in strategy, I don't give a shit about this company as far as compared to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the greatest monetary invention in the history of mankind. And Bitcoin and cold storage is the ultimate fuck you money. It is the only thing that does not have counterparty risk. Everything I've been talking about has counterparty risk. Even the ETFs, they all do. Coinbase, all of these. In an AI world, and in a world that we talked about that is in kind of self-immolation right now, the US government and printing, there is a very good chance that you will see someday.
George Bodine, thank you for being back once again. There's not anything going on in the world right now. There's really not much. And you being the naval aviator that you are, and the military adventurism that we find ourselves in once again. Where are we, George? What's grinding your gears right now? What in the world is happening? Bitcoin sentiment's the lowest it's been in, I don't even know. War's going on. People are unhappy all over the place. Everyone's got a million different opinions, tons of mind reading. I mean, you look at the left, the right, gold bugs, Bitcoiners, everyone's mind reading, engaging in cognitive dissonance. It's hard to know where to turn, George. So I can't wait to talk to you here today. This is wild times.
Well, yeah, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it. This is a very difficult time for people, and it's not going to get, I don't think, much better. Today's, I couldn't even spell naval aviator at one point, and then I became one. Today's the day that Chuck Norris passed away. And, I actually got to spend time with him once, spend an afternoon with him, and it was really cool. It was back in the day when he was like kicking ass. He had just he hadn't beat the shit out of Superfoot Wallace, but he and him, both Bill had gone for like maybe 90 minutes sparring or something. They were just kicking ass. I mean, they were beating the living crap out of each other. He was a tough dude. And I gave him a tour of the cockpit too in the F-18, and he was just such a neat guy. He was very humble, gentlemanly. He had a son with him, and this was a grown son, and he was so polite to him. I mean, he was just like such a nice guy. And he confessed to me. He said, when I was talking to him, he looked down in the cockpit and he said, "Man," he said, "this is what I always wanted to do in life." And he didn't have to say that, and just kind of made my day. It was just such a neat thing. But the reason I mentioned that is, life moves on. Life is short. And, people are very upset right now. It's a chaotic, volatile, violent time. I'm a fan and a believer in the fourth turning. In fact, I was just looking at Neil Howe's and William Strauss's book the other day. Again, I think it's very pertinent to what we're seeing right now. Just for the viewers that aren't familiar, it's basically a cycle theory. And it's based on about an 80 to a 100-year cycle, which is kind of comparable to the longest lived human life within a particular period. And it is very applicable, if you will, for Anglo history. And one of their premier studies involved the United States. And we had 4 periods: Revolutionary War, Civil War, Great Depression leading to World War II. And these are all foundational events, meaning that there is a complete reorganization of the foundational layer to society at the end of this. And it pits institutions against individuals, if you will. I was born shortly after the last fourth turning or crisis winter. That was World War II. And so I'm classified, there's 4 archetypes. I'm actually a nomad, which means that at my point in life here in the fourth turning, as it's coming to the crisis mode, I'm characterized as being like wary, pragmatic, good in emergencies, questioning institutions, basically someone who's been around the road or the block for a while. And so it gives me a perspective looking at this. Now, I will tell you, if you're familiar with the theory, you know that basically it results in war or revolution. And we are going through these end times right now. Their book came out in 97. They accurately predicted the great financial crisis. I mean, almost spot on. And if you follow the theory, they would sit here and tell you that basically we are in it now, meaning it lasts for about 15 to 25 years. I think this crisis is going to resolve itself in the next 3 years. And I don't know what the outcome will be on the other side. On a positive note, I can tell people right now that if you're concerned about things, remember, as you go through this, it's a foundational change that results in what's called the high or the spring, complete rebirth, if you will, of institutions, our trust, our fabric as a society. But getting there through this is going to be a really difficult time. And yeah, I'm paying a lot of attention right now. I'm following, I'm following the war very closely. This war's got so many tentacles that reach out into society beyond just the headlines or the clickbait that's on the news.
Yeah, it's I would love to just dive into that here, your thoughts on that, how it pertains to Bitcoin, because again, all I see, George, and I've been telling people this a lot over the last month or two, people I interview, the live streams we do, I kind of got out of the Bitcoin echo chamber over the last month or two and just tried to look at everything, the Judge Napolitano channels, the Tucker Carlsons, the Candace Owens of the world, the Young Turks, people on the left, so the American left and right, people that have removed themselves from politics completely, people, gold bugs, macro guys, some Bitcoiners, obviously here and there, naturally always kind of come back to that. But boy, George, when you look at everyone's got a different opinion. I've been likening it to like a wheel, and like everyone's a spoke on the wheel. Like no two opinions are the same. Everyone's mind reading. There's tons of cognitive dissonance. Obviously, the fog of war, as you know well better than anyone here. So where does the truth lie? How do we discern truth? How do we figure out what is going on? And the one thing I can say is 98% of what I see from people all over the spectrum is, boy, sound money that you can't be effed with. That sure would fix a lot of these things you guys are all complaining about. I just can't help it.
First off, I do believe that Bitcoin and anything that is a hard asset is what you need to protect yourself in this particular violent and chaotic time. And I think, of course, of all the hard assets, that Bitcoin is the premier monetary asset or a store of value that you can find on planet Earth. And I do think that even though sentiment has been in the toilet for like the last 6 months, I think we're going to see that shift here very quickly as time goes forward. And I do believe that Bitcoin's time is coming, that gold often leads Bitcoin, both in price discovery and as a safety haven. I think that we'll see that coming forward with Bitcoin. It's very, very difficult right now. This fourth turning is unusual because it's occurring in a digital age. It's something that we've never seen before, and it's occurring on the back of AI. And AI is going to make what you said a moment ago, the fact that it's very difficult to discern the truth, even harder going forward. I'd have to say that I can see that on social media platforms. I can see it in the media. You basically don't know what it is you're viewing and whether it's real.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell you some things that are real. You're right. I mean, I've been over in the Gulf and flying around in my F-18 years ago, decades ago. But I can tell you even then that the Strait was known to all military planners, including on board the carrier. I mean, gaming out different scenarios. We knew then that it was, because of the coastline of Iran, almost impossible. It's so narrow and small, impossible to guarantee safe passage of ships. And actually, today, that is more so true. And part of it has to do with what I was discussing in regards to AI. The conflict in Ukraine in 22 was the game changer. We saw one of the world's premier, well, I won't say premier, one of the world's advanced armies get its ass kicked in the first 2 months when Russia invaded Ukraine, because there was an asymmetry of power. And that came from small drones. It came from unusual battlefield tactics that incorporated digital intelligence. That's expanded in the last 3 years. Remember, ChatGPT came out in 22. In the last 3 years, we've seen it exponentially increase, and it's going in places now that I can't follow. It's so quick. Obviously, targeting systems that Palantir are using, incorporating different AI engines, including Anthropic, despite the controversy, has made a huge difference. These drones that I'm discussing right now, I don't know if you're familiar, but the Shahed 131 and the 130, I mean, they're tiny. They can be assembled for $10,000, maybe $50,000 max. They're different capabilities depending upon the type of targeting. They can be corrected, some of them in flight. They are compartmentalized, meaning you can bring little parts with you and on the back of a pickup truck, even in a van that's covered. Get it to a site and you can assemble it in hours and launch it. Everybody should understand that the bombing of the Parslaufen, it's the gas field. It's the north field that is above Cutter's processing plant there. That bombing of the processing plant, which turns liquefied natural gas so that it can be then transported, and it has a small refinery operation there too. That's incredible. I mean, think about it. That's the end of a 3-week conflict where we've been bombing the living shit out of Iran. I mean, I don't think they can put an aircraft up. They probably don't have a jet available to stick in the sky anymore. We bombed 5,000 targets within the first 48 hours, many of them AI driven as targeting plans. And think about that. You have air superiority. You can fly anywhere you want over there, bomb whatever you want. And they still put up 5 ballistic missiles just a couple days ago into that field and that processing plant. And Laufen it's responsible for about 20% of the liquefied natural gas across the planet. That's huge. Prices have spiked over 50% as I'm talking here in Europe right now. And that's nothing compared to some of the other after-on effects that are going to come along here related to that field. Not just that field, but all of the Middle East and the stranglehold within that strait. So I'm not even discussing things like submarines or mines or sea-doos. Believe it or not, nations are starting to weaponize sea-doos. I'm sure you're familiar with that. It's like a 1 or 2 person it almost looks like a scooter that you take out on the water. They're fast, they're maneuverable, they're small, hard to pick up on a radar. If you get them for maybe $10,000, you can weaponize them for probably about the same amount. And you can put out 300 of them in a flock. If you have a marine amphibious bay that you load those things into, you can launch those. And eventually they'll be autonomous weapon systems. One of them washed ashore, still armed. It still had weapons on it off the Black Sea and Turkey's coast not long ago. I think it was back last year. They disarmed it, probably was out of Ukraine. But all of these the point I'm trying to make is these cheap, off-the-shelf weapons that are using AI and eventually neural net AI, meaning they're all working together and autonomously, is where this is going. And there are companies here in the U.S., Anduril is one particular company. Their president, Palmer Luckey, is doing incredible work along these lines for the U.S. Defense Department. So things have changed. We are going to get some lessons learned in this conflict, and I hope we take them home to roost.
Yeah, and going back really quick to what you're saying a minute ago, I mean, for the last 2 decades, everyone's joked, you can't trust everything you see online, and now I feel like we're just at that crescendo, like it's actually trained everyone, well, now you really can't trust everything. You have to verify, which is ironic because that's what Bitcoiners do. It's the trust but verify or don't trust verify meme we've all been talking about. So pretty wild to see that kind of coming full circle with humanity, which I think is a good thing. But there's so many the questions I have, George, honestly, because I've been so deep into this, and literally I could make an argument for both sides. I've been very into the Jason Lowery soft war thesis. I was 3 or 4 years ago, but then to me, I can't see anything else but his thesis playing out. It just we're getting to this crescendo of whether it's nuclear war or now AI, you can throw a bunch of machinery at each other eventually, and we're kind of getting to that point where you can see it coming where what's the point? And then you just escalate it up into the cyber warfare, I guess, right? There's cyberspace, and we're there, but also this real versus abstract power. And I feel like it's a fight between the Professor Jeffrey Sachs versus Professor John Mearsheimer, who have done the debates on stage. One guy, I feel like they're debating this idealistic world versus pragmatic world. And that's what we're seeing in real phase transition, what's happening, but no one can really parse out what's going on. Does it feel like that to you? It feels like war used to be violence. I'm going to come in and take everything, all your resources, and kill your whole village. War is over. And now it's economic. Now it's well, we're going to choke this off. No, we're not. We're not going to, bomb all of you. We're just going to bomb the military points. It just feels like we're half wet, it's just a very weird malaise that we're in.
You have to realize if you study history, Will and Ariel Durant's Story of Civilization is a good series. I mean, if you've got about 1.5 years to set aside reading it, and it takes a while to get through it. But what is the basic theme behind that series of books? It's that mankind has always been at war. It is a war of power. It is a war of resources, borders, but it is a non-stop history of warfare. And AI, I know I keep falling back to AI, but AI is part of this future warfare, and it will not stop. People that are saying AI is a bubble, yes, in the incestuous relationships between maybe hyperscalers, frontier models, yes. These lending platforms between semiconductors and different platforms, yes, I can understand why you might say that this is a bubble. But, you know, it's not going to go away. It is a must have for a modern weapon system. That is where this is going. And these autonomous weapon systems that I'm discussing with you, whether it's a fighter like Fury, which has been proven already, it's flown autonomously. It's being pushed as like a wingman for, let's say I'm in my F-18 and it launches with me and it meets me on the battlefield. It's a fighter. I can look over and see it. It's small, but it has so much capability and it acts as a wingman for me. These are being proven. They've got another Anduril, in fact, is pushing a submarine, extra large underwater vehicle, autonomous too. And that's for the Royal Australian Navy right now. And that's going to continue. We're talking about vehicles that can sit on the ocean floor and listen. They're armed and they can eventually, that the goal is to eventually make them autonomous so they can make their own decision making at sea. And you're looking at vehicles that most people don't realize this, but naval fleets, they have a certain acoustic sound, even from propellers to the propulsion. Sound propagates for a long ways underwater. And it allows you to build acoustic profiles on different ships, from a carrier to destroyers to different fleet types to different nations. And these weapons, whether it's airfield drones or whether it's seaborne or whether it's land, they're not going away. This is going to continue to build. And it is an arms race. We are engaged in it now. And our opponent is China. There's no doubt about it. And we're kicking ass in some ways, but you know what? China's got some great levers over us, things that we cannot defeat. Right now, they control almost between 80 to 90% of the refining of rare earth minerals. And everything that I just said, every single thing that I have already talked about cannot be built, cannot be replaced, cannot be manufactured without those minerals and those magnets. Full stop. It's not if, it's full stop. Without those, you are dead in the water. And China's got 44 million tons of rare earth oxides. And what's important is that 50 years ago, they made a strategic decision and they raised their hand and said, hey, we'll refine those. The rest of the world said, we're not doing that. It's dirty. It pollutes. It's a mess. And they took on that mantle, and today they're going to reap the benefits. And recently, just a few months ago, they signed an initiative that said, we're going to stop exporting these minerals to countries that are using them for offensive weaponry. That's us. We've got to get this resolved. And I was thinking that one of the things that Trump would be doing when he went to China would be discussing this. I know he would be. I'm not sure if that meeting is going to take place now, but it is something that we've got to get resolved. You know, they put up 300 gigawatts of power in 1 year, all of it on solar. And I think we put up maybe 43. They've got 30 nuclear plants in the works right now. You know how many plants, nuclear plants, large plants we've built in America in the last 30 years? One to completion. That was in Georgia. It's the Vogtle plant. The towers 3 and 4, I think it puts out about 2.2 gigawatts of power. So we need right now, we're projected to need 100 gigawatts for all the things that I'm discussing with you right now. We need 100 gigawatts. It's going to take 80 nuclear plants to do that, or a solar field, a big one. Well, where's that coming from? You can build all the data centers you want. You can build all the semiconductors you want. But if you can't plug them into anything, they just sit out there like a rock. And every 3 to 5 years, those semiconductors are going to probably be replaced just from age. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on here, and it's difficult to try and discern what is truth. As you mentioned, that could be the theme of this. What is truth and what is fiction? But I can tell you from hard facts that the things I'm discussing are real, and they are not just threats, but they're also things that we've got to deal with as a nation. And I don't know how we're going to do that, because financially, we're just in a very difficult position right now. I think you saw we just went past 39 trillion on the
wild. Yeah, ironically, I don't know if it was this. I don't know if we hit the same week. No, I think it was within the same 7-day span of the 20 millionth Bitcoin being struck, mining, and 39 trillion. So just a little, small irony there, I guess. But yeah, so you just touched on this, but do you think this is what I think is super confusing to really everybody, even someone, I'll just say myself, right, who's studying this for thousands of hours of my life, and then just a couple hundred in the last couple months since the Venezuela stuff really and really starting to break out. But is it energy play, like you said, rare earths, a proxy war with China? Is it breaking the British crown, Lloyd's of London, what's going on there, a SOFR LIBOR, which just ended? Is it Iran selling oil outside the dollar? Is it it's Israel? Is it all of the above? Is Trump in here playing 4D chess and just checking all these things off the list? Like, what, when you kind of zoom out and look at it, or is it the Judge Napolitano crowd of like, what the hell are we doing? Why are we doing any of this? And we should have the Constitution. How can we go vote to go to war? Where's the evidence? Where do you kind of, when you zoom out with all of it, what makes the most sense to you? All right, real talk for a second. We all know health insurance is basically a fiat system of healthcare. The biggest debauchery there is. It's expensive, confusing. Somehow you still end up paying hundreds of dollars for a Band-Aid. We moved to crowd sharing almost 5 years ago. It's the best decision we ever made. Instead of sending your money to the insurance company's black hole, you join a like-minded community that directly funds each other's medical bills. Simple, transparent, way cheaper. And that difference you save, you can invest in Bitcoin. It's an amazing win-win. And look, we're part of the Bitcoin community because we believe in freedom, decentralization. Crowd Health brings that same mindset to healthcare. You choose your doctor, you pay in cash, and the community's got your back when the big bills hit. No networks, no middlemen, no bureaucrats trying to approve your care, just people helping people the way it should be. You make decisions about your health. That's as sovereign as it gets. So if you're ready to take the orange pill for your health, this open enrollment, go to Join Crowd Health to get started for $99 for your first 3 months using code Brandon at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, code Brandon. Crowd Health is not insurance. Opt out. Take your power back. This is how we win. Generational wealth doesn't happen by accident. Bitcoin fixed the money, but it didn't fix the system of protecting and passing it on. Bitcoiners, we have to live in two different worlds, idealism versus pragmatism. That's where Meanwhile comes in. It's the world's first Bitcoin-denominated life insurance company, regulated in Bermuda and built entirely by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. With Meanwhile, long-term holders can grow and protect their Bitcoin wealth through tax-free policy loans, no repayment obligation, no margin call risk, while making inheritance simple and secure and entirely in Bitcoin. It's about sovereignty, stewardship, and building a legacy that lasts centuries. Because if Bitcoin is forever, your plan should be too. Learn more and sign up with code 4QPBWC at meanwhile.bm. That's meanwhile.bm, code 4QPBWC, or just sign up in the link in the description below.
I
Sorry to put you on the spot. I know.
I can't stand them. And I don't support any political party. I think that this administration has probably made a strategic error in their misunderstanding of second order consequences to this event here. This particular war cannot go on. If it continues for another 30 days and that strait remains closed, I mean, we are going to see severe breakage within the system. And I mean global system. I'm not talking about just over in the Middle East. I mean for everyone. Already it's starting to flip now. The Fed, it's looking like they're not going to be making any rate hikes this year. We just printed 3.4 on the producer index. I mean, that's some serious inflation. So things are already unraveling. As far as, it's difficult for me to understand what the strategic goals of this particular conflict are. I mean, I've looked at them. At first, I could understand the discussion around ending nuclear capability for Iran. That makes sense. At the same time, I was told just last year that our bombing there had totally obliterated their capability, that it was done. It's off the face of the planet. So I don't understand. I mean, was I lied to? Was it sudden breakthrough within 6 months here that allowed them to get to a place where they were only days away from nuclear capability? Doesn't make sense to me. The other thing is that, regime change that they pursued here. If you don't have a plan or there's not support for a backup plan to a leader that you decapitate and take out, then who fills that gap? You're not in charge of who fills that gap. So I think they're making a lot of strategic missteps here and maybe not understanding the consequences. It could be related to the fact that they had such a successful operation in Venezuela that it led them to think that there'd be a similar outcome and that'd be a very quick, short war with overwhelming victory. I personally don't see that. And again, I don't like to get into politics, but I will say that I don't think that this administration understands the consequences of what they're doing right now. And if that's the case, then you need to be protecting yourself. You know, people get confused when they think about currencies. And you mentioned about, the dollar or a discussion about the dollar. Well, the dollar, think of the dollar as a currency, but don't try and picture or try to break in your own mind the idea of it as a store of value. Try to think that U.S. treasuries, when we, getting back to how we came to the petrodollar, when Nixon closed the gold window in 71, I mean, we basically were adrift. We needed something to replace that dollar, to back that dollar. And basically the petrodollar system came about. By 75, I believe all the OPEC countries had signed on board for this. And it put a tremendous burden on the U.S. I think one that wasn't fully thought out again, because ever since then, we've seen U.S. treasuries as the basis for this storage of value. We're trying to peg, if you will, to the U.S. treasuries and force a market for those. Going forward, we can already see that things have changed. I mentioned that invasion in 22. That was a game changer. When the U.S. seized foreign reserves for Russia, you can see on a chart, any chart will show you that U.S. nations across the world began to stockpile gold, and they have done so now for 4 years, and begin to move away from U.S. treasuries. I believe recently, in fact, that actually flipped for the first time in decades, that central banks held more of their gold reserves than treasuries. So that market is changing, but it doesn't mean that the dollar itself is going away as a reserve currency. The first reserve currency for the world was in Spain, and it lasted from like 1535 to 1700 or so, almost 200 years. It took a long time to die. Even after Spain was no longer a superpower, after its Spanish Armada had been defeated, even after it was no longer a presence in force on the seas, it still remained that. Why? Because nations are always attempting to find something that is a common courtesy or currency that they can use for trade. What we really need to think about is where Bitcoin is going to go in the future when it comes to settlement, how that's going to work. And I think that we will see settlement eventually move to a combination of either Bitcoin, gold, maybe a special drawings rights basket. But the current conflict that we've seen, and the fact that you mentioned already that yuan was used for Iran's safe passage of one of the Chinese ships recently, it doesn't mean that the Chinese yuan is going to become more dominant as a currency in settlement. It just means that, hey, guess what? That's about all that Iran can get right now. Although if you were watching Bitcoin, what did you see after the conflict started? You noticed that Bitcoin itself spiked tremendously in Iran because people wanted it. They wanted to get their money into something. And the price of it, the exchange rate over there, was just off the charts. I know I've gone on for a while. I better take a break.
No, this is wonderful, because everyone's searching for answers and truth, at the end of the day. So this is, a lot of people are black-pilled, and like you said, Bitcoin being, as I just had Luke Groman on a few weeks ago, and he even said, he sold out of his position. He's a trader. He's great at what he does. The promise of Bitcoin is that you don't have to be Luke Groman and trade in and out of this. It can just be this settlement, this savings tool for people, no matter what you're doing. That's the beauty of it. But people being black-pilled, it's the greatest, smoke alarm of liquidity, as Luke says. And so, like you just said, it's something that people are running to in times of fear. Or we saw in Ukraine and Russia, like you said, people leaving with their seed phrases in their hand, their wallet, or in their head. Is it going to take pain? People are so black-pilled right now and turning away and going back into the boiling pot of government currencies. And I agree. I think they can last a long time. Like you said, you gave the history of currencies and failing currencies that are, that just people have in their head. And so we're conditioned to it. It's all relative. We're born into it. So is it going to just take a lot of pain, George, for people to say, hey, why am I using these government currencies that steal from me all the time? And the politicians do whatever they want with them. And, these satanic groups running around the world that are controlling things, and we're just going to keep funding them? What is it going to take for people to realize what's happening?
I think that people are going to have to learn patience here regarding Bitcoin. I mean, Bitcoin is what you have to understand is duration risk, and the great mismatches that are going on right now in duration risk. The fact that people are not understanding that as time goes by, in fact, I'd have to say Bitcoin is the only asset where time is your friend, and where their duration risk for me is basically zero. In fact, there is nothing else on planet Earth that I would rather hold than Bitcoin over any length of time. Why? Because I know from its proven history, short as it is, that it goes up and to the right, and that it's going to continue to do so. I'm convinced that it will go up and to the right forever. I also think my thesis hasn't changed in the sense that I believe within the ending of this crisis, we'll see Bitcoin at $1 million a coin. And for many people, then it's going to be too late. There are a lot of people that traded out of Bitcoin over this last cycle, and I think that was a mistake, although I understand it for the long-term holders that were selling into this with very old coins. I mean, it makes sense. There are people that have held Bitcoin for 10, 12 years, and this is their moment when it crested 100,000, which I did not expect to see that kind of long-term holders dispersing into this market. I think one of the best explanations for that, though, is the fact that the liquidity existed in this market. Bitcoin was finally at a market cap where you could take 80,000 coins, you could liquidate them on a weekend in thin trading and actually not collapse the market. I was shocked. For me, it is a moment where I will never forget. So those people that moved out of Bitcoin, I assume they did so because they were at a point where they wanted to do something else in life, and this was their moment. They had the liquidity, they had the coins, and over a long period of time, months in fact, we saw long-term holders sell into this bull run. That stopped. I mean, that's pretty much ceased now. That movement out in long-term holders is gone. It kind of died out below about 80K. And that makes sense when you think about it. The good news is for everybody out there that's a Bitcoiner like myself, a hardcore maxi, is that this is exactly what you want to see. You want to see these long-term holders sell into every bull run. You want those coins to change hands. You want to have a realized cap that is moving up and to the right also. You want to see new price points and new price levels and new price discovery. And we're getting that. So I'm very encouraged. Unlike many people, I'm very encouraged what I'm seeing here. And I've been stacking Bitcoin. I ended up selling Strategy some time ago when it was up there, and I thought that it would probably be struggling for a little bit with the Bitcoin treasury companies. And so I had some extra cash, and I've been buying Bitcoin. Surprisingly enough, I actually moved some of my assets back into both Strategy, but more importantly, into their credit product, Stretch. And, that's been an incredible deal. I mean, that's a revolutionary product.
Yeah, it is. And I wanted to touch on that with you in a little bit, but I'll kind of ask you it now a little bit. It makes me think of Greshman's Law. We're obviously, again, like you said, fourth turning, like we started, we're going through this phase transition where it's tough to spend Bitcoin for many reasons, whether it's taxes and people are worried about that, or hey, it's just not, ubiquitous everywhere. Like there's many reasons for that. And so it makes me think of Gresham's Law, the hardest money. Like you said, it's great to hold long term. And it eventually becomes this currency over time that people are using all over the place. But it does, like you said, it's this mismatch of time horizons. That's a lot of it. And it causes a lot of the fighting too. Like people in between, because like you said, for Stretch and some of these things, it's amazing for someone who's maybe at the end of their career or whatever it is. And they're like, hey, I just want some simple income. So I would love for you to just kind of touch on that, like Saylor, what's going on there? Because I don't know how Wall Street hasn't caught up to what he's doing, quite honestly. I mean, it's been a number of years now. Obviously, this is newer products and offerings, but it's pretty incredible what's happening.
Yeah, I'd have to say it is revolutionary. It is. I think he is correct in identifying this as the iPhone moment. At first, when the product came out, I had difficulty understanding the mechanics behind it. But the more I studied it and began to watch how they played the market and the interest rate, it became clearer to me that this really was going to take off. And it's incredible. It is technically a perpetual preferred. By the way, I don't know, you probably know this, but that was created by AI. Remember our earlier discussion regarding AI?
Mm-hmm.
AI created Stretch. And you're looking at a product that mirrors like a money market or it's very similar to a bond, except here's what's so interesting about it is it flips the mechanics totally. It's totally backwards, which is the part that I had difficulty understanding. It maintains a fixed price and it's using the interest rate to keep that price at par. Imagine what I just said there. So it's one of the reasons why it's up to 11.5%. Between 100 to 1, they want to maintain between 99 and 101. And between 100 and 101, it's issuing time. They're not issuing, it's buying Bitcoin. I mean, they actually accumulated almost 5,000 Bitcoin just a few days ago from this one product. Remember, we mine, and that was in a day. We mine 450 Bitcoin a day. Pretty soon we're going to have another halving, and we're going to have half that coming out. Saylor and his company are basically a super halving. I mean, they're taking coins off the market, and they're not coming back, kids. So if you're out there and you're thinking if this is a good time to get Bitcoin, it is a good time because there isn't going to be that many left. We crossed the 20 million mark. That 1 million, it's going to take 100 and some odd years to mine the last coin, but most of that is even front run. We're going to have all of it basically hoovered up here by 2035 to 2050. It's going to be very little left. So you have a limited amount of time, and you're competing with somebody who's discovered a credit instrument that is revolutionary, that is just taking off. And you are right. Wall Street TradFi has not understood this. They're not on board. It is going to accelerate as more and more of the fixed income market comes into this. Imagine pensions, insurance companies, retirees, people like myself that have got cash sitting on the side. I just put some of it in before the ex-dividend date, which was the 13th of March. Now, at the end of the month, I'll get that payout. And I'll get to pay out, it'll be 11.5%. And here's another thing. That price, what gave me a little pause with it was that the price was volatile at first. And when we had the wick down to 59K recently, it went down to 100. Strategy went down to $107 a share. And I think Stretch went down to about 92 or 93 or something in there. And I bought it. I bought it shortly thereafter. Why not? Because guess what? I believed in the product after I'd studied it. I thought it's going to go back up to 100. I'm not just going to capture the 11.5% or 11.25%. I'm going to capture that and the par value too. It sounds like I'm almost shilling it, or like I am a huge fan of strategy and what they're doing here. I'm just using it right now. And just as myself getting back in strategy, I don't give a shit about this company as far as compared to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the greatest monetary invention in the history of mankind. And Bitcoin and cold storage is the ultimate fuck you money. It is the only thing that does not have counterparty risk. Everything I've been talking about has counterparty risk. Even the ETFs, they all do. Coinbase, all of these. And in an AI world, and in a world that we talked about that is in kind of self-immolation right now, the U.S. government and printing, there is a very good chance that you will see someday seizures going on, trying to capture someone's Bitcoin. So I am a fan solely of Bitcoin and self-custody in a hardware wallet. The only reason that I have all these other exposures is because of my age and the way that my working background that gave me retirement accounts and products and pension and things of this nature. So just stay focused, kids. HODL, acquire, stack Bitcoin like a smart psychopath. HODL, and patience, duration, risk. I mean, Bitcoin is the only asset that I know of that I'm comfortable with duration risk out as far as you can see.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, George, because I know that's the question I have, and a lot of people will come at that. So I'm glad you clarified that, because I think of 6102. Like we're diverging in this world, obviously, like we've been talking about this whole time. Whether it's like we outlast our government, or do we get taken by the government, in essence. So either way, those have huge ramifications. Either way, what are your thoughts on just in second order effects and what's happening here? We talked about this with war. So it's like, do you look at Saylor? Do you think it's a top of funnel? Because like he's orange pilled so many people, the education he's done, and just the good he's actually done for bringing people to Bitcoin. Do you see MicroStrategy or your strategy and what they're all doing? Do you see that as a top of funnel and people truly coming to Bitcoin, or is it something that is a Trojan horse for good or a Trojan horse for bad, where it could get 6102? And also, I know this is a lot, but it's just also like, is he? It just looks like it's going to be disrupting the bond market, the bank. I know he said like, I don't want to be a bank, but here you are. I mean, you're basically a bank. I mean, the deposits are, as time goes on here, the deposits are going to be flowing out of bank accounts and going here. What are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I've often, that I've always said that I felt Strategy was going to become the world's first Bitcoin bank, or
Mm-hmm.
more importantly, I should really clarify that it's the largest Bitcoin financial platform on
Yeah,
earth. And
like a
although he
proxy
did make
banker.
that
Yeah.
comment, yeah, although he did make that comment about, not becoming a bank, that is not correct. He is actually doing that. These products that he's producing are the types of products that we will see in the future. He wants to, basically they're using their treasury operations with this intelligent leverage, they call it, to financialize and securitize Bitcoin. They're building products on top of Bitcoin. Why is Strategy successful as a company right now? It's Bitcoin. Strategy was a zombie company going nowhere. Michael was getting ready to go get on his yacht and retire, probably expire within a few years. Well, guess what? They have life now because of Bitcoin. Why does Stretch work? Why does that perpetual preferred? Why is it so successful? Why do I think it's going to be successful going forward? It's Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin that is driving all this. And the fact that they're building these products on the world's greatest monetary invention, the best store of value that you will ever see, is what's going to make them successful. And it's not going to stop. Again, everything they're taking is off the market. I don't see they're not going to sell any Bitcoin. So what are they going to do with it? They're going to securitize it. They're going to build products. They're going to have credits. Michael just recently, in an interview like 1 or 2 days ago, discussed the fact that somebody could have an account that paid 7-8% interest on it, like a savings account. Well, how do you achieve that? You don't do it with fiat cuck bucks. You do it with Bitcoin, something that actually can pay you. One of the reasons why gold's struggling right now is because, like I said, these interest rate cuts are off the chart. They're off the market right now. That's probably not going to happen. Gold suffers in that type of an environment. Although I do think, if you want the truth, if I'm correct in what I said about volatility, chaos, and where we are in the fourth turning, you're going to probably see gold be very, very volatile. I definitely would not try to trade that. I would not try to time that. I don't think you should try and trade or time Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And you touched on gold and silver earlier, and you just did again. I know they've had a little bit of a pullback. It's wild to see the bond market and the gold and silver, these traditionally, non-volatile, way less volatile assets than whatever, they just don't do the movements. The moves they've had of recent, to modern times here have been wild to see. Is that just the fracturing of the markets and people just, information asymmetry and people kind of figuring out what's going on?
Have you ever seen Merkelman's chart of gold volatility during the Weimar Republic?
Weimar,
Have you
yeah.
ever seen that?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. So what does that tell you? It tells you that in that volatility, in that chaotic period, people are reacting. They're reacting to news cycles. They're reacting to what they see in the debasement trade. And again, it's impossible for you as an investor to try and time these events, especially if we really are in a period that's going to be very difficult. I told you our debt just went over 39 trillion, I think it is. We take in about $5 trillion a year. Did you know, for the 5 untouchables, the things that we cannot touch, basically Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on our debt, and defense. And by the way, our defense, we spend almost 900 trillion or 900 billion, and the Trump administration wants to raise that to 1.5 trillion dollars. That's a number they floated. So of those, just where they are now, of right where they are now, that is about 4.75 trillion dollars. There's no flexibility there at all. We're spending everything we take in, and this is during a record stock market period. What is that going to happen if we have a recession? And if they keep fucking around over there, we're going to be in a recession. We spend $7 trillion every year. It doesn't matter if it's Trump, doesn't matter if it was Biden last time, they're both spending the same amount of money. And in fact, right now, this war is unfunded. When you get a defense authorization bill passed, it doesn't include wars. This war is unfunded. We spent $12 billion in like 7 days. It is right now stabilizing probably about $1 billion a day, unfunded. That means that we're going to have to come up with a bill to give them money. Where's that money coming from? And I mentioned interest. We're going to roll over $9 trillion in interest this year. $9 trillion of U.S. treasuries are going to roll over. They're going to go, if we stay right now, the 10 years at about 4.3. So for every $1 trillion that we roll over right now, if those interest rates stay the same, we are going to add about $30 billion to the interest expense. That means you're going to come up with next year, you're going to have 1.3 trillion in interest expense. What did I say we take in? 5 trillion. What do we spend? 4.75. Well, we spend 7, but those 5 untouchables are almost all of our receipts. And now you're going to add that interest expense on there. Treasury market, you probably noticed that when we went to war, the treasuries, there was an initial flock to treasuries, like there often is, as a safe haven asset. But what happened afterwards, that those interest rates are going up. They haven't fallen. And I'm sure Scott Besson is probably making alcohol a bigger part of his life right now, because he's thinking, how in the hell am I going to roll over, $9 trillion? I don't know how he's going to do it. He probably hasn't. I have no idea what's going on there. So, these are some real issues. And all of these issues, everything I'm discussing has done nothing for my thesis regarding Bitcoin except reinforce it. I'm as bullish today as I have ever been on Bitcoin. And I don't see, what people have to understand is there's an asymmetry of information that you and I and everybody that's listening and watching this, any hardcore Bitcoiner has got. We have an asymmetry of information, a power, a superpower. The rest of the world does not know this. I think it was River that came up with some statistics recently. I believe that they're probably accurate in saying, I think it was around 100 million people probably have Bitcoin exposure out of the entire planet. It's nothing. People still are not here. And retail hasn't been here at all in this last year and a half. So again, I'm as bullish as ever. Even though, and I know I don't want people to think I'm just a doomer and trying to point out all these issues we've got. What I'm trying to tell you is this. If I'm right about this being the end game in the fourth turning, you need to prepare yourself. You got to be ready for it. You got to man up, or woman up, whatever it is. Women can be great warriors. I don't know if you ever heard about the Scythian warriors, the women. They were some badasses back in probably around 900 BC. But you need to man up, and you need to understand what's coming and protect yourself. You need the hardest assets you can find. You need things that this government cannot print. And they can't print Bitcoin. They can't print commodities. Nobody's going to go out there and print oil. And so those are the key things to think about as you're going forward.
That's a great segue into just like the end game in general. Has your thesis, or is there anything in your thesis? Like you said, you're extremely bullish going forward on Bitcoin, obviously the protocol. Has the end game changed in of where what Bitcoin has to account for at the end of the day? It's like Saylor's building all this digital credit, and all these things are going on, these instruments, the derivatives. Like at the end of the day, and we talk about Jeff Booth a lot here when I usually ask people, what's your end game thesis of, he's like, it's got to account for all 900 trillion. It's going to be the accounting mechanism for life. There's a lot of people, like we said earlier, the sentiment. So many people are blackpilled. They've left Bitcoin. They sold whatever it is. They think, there's no way government's ever going to let us do this. And my reminder to everyone is, hey, freedom is taken. It's not granted, period. And this is how life works. Like you said, it's a story and history of war, and waiting for the government to let us free and all this nonsense. What makes people a Bitcoiner? Like going through this fatal funnel, I feel like we're, the studying, the rug pulls, the experiences, the wisdom, all these things that make you, the humility that make you a Bitcoiner at the end of the day. What is that make someone that, or get to Bitcoin finally? Is the pain, the loss, the hurt, and has that overall thesis change and where we're going, or maybe when we get there?
I think that unfortunately, we're probably not going to see a lot of retail type investors come into Bitcoin, especially not in the way that I recommend: cold storage, holding the asset. And I think you can see from the last, say, 2 years what's happening. In fact, I think Marty Bent put out a great chart the other day that shows you in real time the loss of retail holdings of Bitcoin, and governments, sovereigns, institutions starting to take up a bigger and bigger part of that pie. So if anything, that should give you more reason to understand what I said before. You have a limited time in order to acquire the Bitcoin that you want to get before it begins to reach out of price. And although this particular cycle did not peak anywhere near where I thought it was going to peak, that has not changed my thesis of where it's going. I do believe that, again, I would say that myself and others misjudged and misunderstood the 100K psychological barrier that was put up there for long-term holders to get through. And quite frankly, that was their profit-taking moment. Again, I discussed that. I think it's a great thing that happened. I think the realized cap changing at those price points is a very good thing long-term for Bitcoin. But I don't think most investors are going to be able to understand Bitcoin the way that hardcore Bitcoiners like myself and yourself understand it. And it's a shame. We're trying to do the part that we can in educating people, but quite frankly, the inertia behind that adoption is difficult to overcome.
There's one thing more important than Bitcoin: the time you have and the people and relationships you build. In a world full of noise, the real signal is meeting with other Bitcoiners IRL, finding Bitcoin-only events, connecting face-to-face, and supporting the circular economy through Bitcoin-friendly merchants around the world. That's exactly what Club Orange is built for. Build your circle. Support Bitcoin-only companies. The only place in the world you can find all that in one spot is the Club Orange app on iOS or Android. Go to cluborange.org, what used to be the Orange Pill app, or scan the code here. Everything you are learning in this episode is completely moot and does not matter if you hold Bitcoin and are still leaving it on an exchange or sharing keys and your KYC information with a third party. This is your wake-up call now. You are only self-sovereign if you alone hold the keys to your wealth. 100% self-custody sounds daunting at first. Believe me, I lost 2 years of massive gains over a decade ago because I was worried about taking the few minutes it took to understand self-custody. And that's exactly why you need to talk to my friends, Tony Yazbek and his team at the Bitcoin Way. We just interviewed Tony recently, has over 80,000 views, an overwhelming response. People love his story and the simplicity he shares of how easy it is to custody and take ownership of the greatest money we've ever seen. They'll train you to do it right the first time. Head on over to thebitcoinway.com/Brandon to schedule a free 30-minute consultation today. Their 5-star rated service is exactly what you need. Quit sitting on your hands like I did and get started today. Again, that's thebitcoinway.com/BRANDON. Yeah, it is. It truly is. What are your thoughts on just stablecoins? Obviously there's been, a bunch of stuff just recently. I don't know if it was Whitney Webb or someone had said something about kind of making some accusations at Tether, just stablecoins, what's going on there. Obviously it's been a massive thing. The US, one of my conspiracy theories, George, is that we were talking a lot about Bitcoin. Trump was talking Bitcoin. I don't know if he ever, it may remind me if I'm missing this or I'm wrong, but I don't know if he ever talked about stablecoins during the campaign. He talked about Bitcoin and crypto during the campaign, stuff like that. But the stablecoin thing has just exploded over the last year and a half. And it seems like my conspiracy theory is that we are talking this all up, but then they kind of got in the office, and maybe they knew at the time. It was just like, oh, we got this thing that we can get treasuries out there. We can kind of kick this dollar thing down the road and kick the can here. And we need a way to get our treasuries out there. And here we are at the stable coins and what's happening there. And Bitcoin's kind of in the back burner because that's this, again, the smoke alarm at the end of the day, as we come back full circle to Luke Groman always says. So what do you see when you kind of, again, zoom out, the stable coins, what's going on there? How do you look at all that from your vantage point?
Well, I'm really thinking that there's two parts to that question, but I think that if you try to put this in context of what we were discussing before, let's go back and just take a look at what I was discussing before regarding AI and the fact that AI is not going away. We have seen the rise of what is called agentic AI, the idea of these lobsters, Claude bots, OpenBot, whatever, OpenClaw, the idea that there are going to be independent acting agents that are using digital wallets to make small transactions. Obviously, that's probably, in my mind, I want it to occur on Lightning. That's where I want that to happen. With Bitcoin as the base layer, think of Bitcoin as US treasuries in this case, the base layer, the storage of value, but payment rails probably on Lightning or stablecoins. And this is happening now. I mean, we are seeing the first use of these digital wallets by AI agents. I mean, you can go online and you can see it's happening. Now it's happening. And where is that, if you game it out and you think to yourself, where is that going to go? First off, I don't know if you realize this or not, but there's a place that you can go online and you can register, you can fill out an application to become basically a meat puppet, like a little humanoid courier for agentic AI. And the last I checked, there were like 50,000 applications on this site for people that were trying to say, yeah, I'll go to a bank, I'll open up an account for you. I'll go to an office to pick up a paper for you and transport it and get paid for it. AI is going to, I don't want to say decimate, it's going to, yeah, maybe that is the word. Maybe decimate is the word. I don't know. I think that you're going to lose probably about 30% of the white collar jobs here in the next 3 years. I'm talking about anything that's going on between your ears right now, my friend, meaning whether you're thinking about calculating, you're thinking about finances, you're thinking about analytics, you're thinking about design, web design, software design, implementation, all of these jobs, lawyers, accountants, my God.
Yeah. Bookkeeping, everything.
We are going to see a tremendous turnover in jobs here, and they're going to change significantly. And what I see in that world, again, it's all going to be digital money. And I think that stable coins are going to be part of that system. I'm hoping that Lightning just had, for the first time in recorded history, it was a breakthrough. They had a $1 million transaction on Lightning. Went through instantly, of course. I mean, think about what I just said, $1 million.
Wild.
So I do believe that Lightning can hold that promise for agentic AI. But at the same time, even if it doesn't, even if it's on the rails of stable coins, if you look at AI itself think of it as a person, and you interview AI, whether it's the frontier models or some of these agentic AI models, Bitcoin Policy Institute just did that. And what did AI overwhelmingly was the word they use, desire? They desired Bitcoin above all else. They understood that all the other shitcoins were centralized. They understood that even stable coins have centralization risks and on-ramp risk too, OFAC compliant risk, all kinds of risks. But store of value, Bitcoin won overall. As our agentic AI becomes more and more intelligent, I think that I think that they'll actually become more and more enamored with using Bitcoin. So I'm very, very bullish on where I think this is going to go. Again, I just think it's going to be a really tough time to get through this next 3 to 5 years. But, if you can just stay focused, if you just can somehow understand when I talk about duration risk and how it is approaching zero, if you just hold on to Bitcoin, all you have to do is to have Bitcoin, hold on to it, and you will see generational wealth. Why do you think these products are being built on top of Bitcoin, and who's going to profit from those? Do you think in 5 to 10 years, you think George here is going to have to sell his Bitcoin because I want to get something? I'll never have to sell it. The buy, borrow, die strategy will be in full effect. You'll have AI agents, you'll have AI wallets everywhere demanding Bitcoin as a base layer, even if it's in small amounts. I think stable coins are here. I don't think they're going to stop. I think they're one step away from being a CBDC if the government wants them to be. I think we're going to see ultimate surveillance through that system, but I don't think there's anything you can do about it. Remember, Bitcoin and cold storage, that's the ultimate escape.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's wild, George. I mean, they have to, not only do you have to print in general just because it's a debt-based system, and like you said, whether it's the rolling the bonds over, just everything and the interest that's happening. But I mean, like the AI, what's happening, the jobs being cut because of this. I mean, and I've talked to a bunch of people recently, and they're worried, like it's pre-coiners, no coiners, normies, these conversations where I'm just, starting to, they ask me what I do, stuff like that. And it's like, oh boy, you don't know how to answer at times. And you're kind of just trying to feel them out. Like, are you ready? Are you ready for how I think? So, people are worried though. And it's like, you're worried for other people. You're worried for your family and friends. You're worried for other people of like, they're like, well, was my job going to get cut? Am I going to cut? And it's like, they have to, what's the other option, George? Other than printing right through all this, the train, as Lynn says, that, nothing stops this train, and the printing is going to be massive. And when these emotions go up, intelligence goes down, and people are just like, hey, I don't know what to do. And then they're just clamoring for whatever the government's telling them and shoveling them. And most won't have Bitcoin, to your point, like we said earlier. Not everyone's going to have Bitcoin at that time. We're trying to get the word out. But who's going to, go through that? This is like the bifurcation of CBDCs and slavery or Bitcoin and freedom.
Yeah, and what you have to understand too is that this is not like one of the common themes right now is at first it was AI is not going to take jobs. A year ago, I was still seeing those articles, and that's just absolute bullshit. That is nothing but a fucking lie. AI is going to take jobs. It's already taking jobs. It's taking entry level jobs. It's right now, if you look at the labor statistics over the last year, if you exclude healthcare, we haven't created any jobs in this country. These companies are not hiring. Microsoft, one of the biggest is Amazon. I mean, they released a leaked memo that basically told you, 600,000 people we're not going to hire over the next 5 years. Why? Because AI. And we haven't even seen robotics come on board yet. Frontier, there's only one company that I'm aware of that's really working with autonomous robots, meaning you stick a robot in a room, it has a command to go clean it, and then it just does it on its own. But they're coming. They are coming. And these robots are going to further take more and more of the physical labor. But what I want to get back to is what's unique about this is that AI is taking place, what I mentioned earlier. It's what's between your ears. It's thought. It's brains. And the common theme that I've seen lately is that AI is going to create other jobs, that you'll move into a sector that's related to AI. Well, you know what? If you're an entrepreneur, if you're somebody that wants to create something, this is a great time for you. You can go out there and you can kick some major ass. But you know what? If you just want a job, this is unlike any technology that we've used before. In the Industrial Revolution, we had towards the end of the 1800s, we developed the tractor, the reaper, many different farm implements that basically took farm workers, probably about 200 to 250 per acre, and sent them home. But the thing is, there was a place for them to go. At the start of the Industrial Revolution, there were all kinds of jobs that were coming of age and relied on work as capital. How does that work in the future when work or capital is no longer human labor? And everything that I'm talking about is being replaced by thought, by what goes on between your ears. Where do you go then? And that is going to be very difficult. When I say white collar jobs, that's what I'm talking about. And again, it's a threat, but you can prepare yourself. I worry about this too. I mean, I worry with my kids. I wonder about I look at them and I wonder what their job, I try to figure out in my mind, what is their job? What is their exposure? The best advice that I can give anybody right now is if you feel that if you're not fluent in AI, you should be using it every day. If you can't afford a subscription, just get multiple free uses from different frontier models, but use it every day. If you can, pick one, go on a minimum platform as far as payments and start using it constantly. And if you don't understand how to use it, believe it or not, the best thing you can do is ask the AI. Just say, hey, what is a good way for me to write a prompt on this particular subject? How should I phrase these questions? What can you teach me about yourself? How should I interface and use you? I just can't express it enough. It's not going away. No matter, I know there are incestuous relationships right now as far as financing. I'm not saying it isn't a bubble in some of that, but I am telling you it's not going to go away.
It's incredible times. Incredible times, George. Like we said at the beginning, there's really nothing going on in the world. There's really what, in kind of, closing here, what scares you? Is there anything that scares you in Bitcoin? Obviously, there's the infighting in Bitcoin. There's always going to be infighting in Bitcoin. That's never going to end, especially as we add more people going forward to the network. We talked about war. We talked about AI. Is there anything we haven't touched on, or anything you'd like to hit that is worrisome to you, or maybe it's something that you're like, nope, hey, this is all gonna, we're all gonna hammer these things, and I'm super pumped about this over here. Anything like that we haven't touched?
I'm I'm not worried about Bitcoin. I'm confident going forward in Bitcoin. I know that you touched just now on the fact that, yeah, there is a controversy regarding knots and core and what's known as BIP 110. By the way, if you're listening to this and you've made any kind of profits from Bitcoin, if you've been in this space for any length of time, then you have a responsibility as a person to get a node, run a node.
Yeah.
It is so important. Nodes hold the power to the network. Listen, when miners tell you that they're in charge, that they hold the power, or big exchanges or any of that other jack shit, that is incorrect. Nodes hold the power. That is the power of the network. So you have to run a node if you are a Bitcoiner. And I suggest that you do your own research. I run knots. I don't trust core. I think core is incompetent. I think that their quality control and their communications, their level of relationships internally that are interconnected and almost like a walled garden. I think it's been really detrimental to core as an organization. I think it should basically be dismantled brick by brick. And I run, as I said, knots, and I'm signaling for BIP 110, which is at this time a miner activated soft fork. And if it's not activated sometime in August, September, it will be a user activated soft fork. I do believe it will be successful. I think it'll probably be right up to the wire, to the end there, just like with SegWit. SegWit was the same. SegWit had very few actual nodes signaling for SegWit 148, BIP 148. But guess what? Passed. Nodes have the power. All you have to do is go out there and seize it. And you have that power. So run a node. For me, I run knots. I'm signaling for BIP 110. I think it will strengthen the network as money. And you have to realize that my basic premise that Bitcoin is money, peer-to-peer electronic cash. And it's not anything else than that arbitrary data should be fought. There should be as much friction in its use on board Bitcoin's base layer as possible. And I do believe that we have a bright future in front of us. And I think the best thing that could have happened was Core V30, failed software implementation that came out, resulted in the loss of some people's Bitcoins in legacy wallets. I think that's a great thing that we had that controversy, because now people like myself are fired up. And that's a good thing for Bitcoin. The other thing I would say is that, I actually, from studying history, you have to realize that if things do run in cycles, then this is a great period for you to grow as a human being. This is a time which will challenge you. It's the time where, if you think of it in biblical senses, it's where you go out in the desert and you sit in the ashes and you grow, you get stronger, you get tougher. And on the other side of this, again, when we have a reset, I believe it will be a much brighter future for us. And I think that the things we're going through right now have to happen. So although I know that some of these things are very disturbing, nonetheless, one, you have to question what you can control and what you can't. And one of the things you can control is how you view things in life and how you treat other people. This is a wonderful period, if I'm right about AI also, a wonderful period to reconnect with human beings. What we're doing right here with actual humans to human interaction, with me screwing up some things probably and hiccuping and drinking online and everything else, it's probably pretty important, you know that? Because these type of events will become more precious to us as human beings going forward. This is a great time to reconnect with family, with friends, with people you love, with someone you haven't talked to in a while. It's also a great time to understand how it's important to be nice to people. There are people right now that are struggling. I mean, they're really struggling. Sometimes one little thing that you say to a person can make a big difference in their life. Sometimes it's not saying something. Sometimes it's just being there for another human being or someone in your family. I started this podcast out talking about Chuck Norris. Chuck Norris died. He's gone. He left here with nothing, not a single thing. He didn't take one thing with him. I don't know if he had any Bitcoin, but if he had any Bitcoin with him, it didn't go with him, not one cent. He crossed the river Styx with the boatman, alone and naked, nothing. But you know what he did is he left memories. You remember what I told you at the beginning about my memory of him? It's a great memory, and it made me feel good that day. I thought, Chuck Norris, he wishes he was, that's a pretty cool thing for him to have said. And, I never forgot it. And little things like that can make a big difference. So, kids, you got to just zoom out and think about where this is going to be in a few years.
Well, Godspeed to you, George. Not many people can say that Chuck Norris said they wanted to be them. So that's the memes always go towards Chuck Norris. So it's pretty incredible that you're one of the very few. That's incredible.
I'm a lucky guy,
man. Lucky, yeah, exactly. That's well said. Very, very blessed. Where can people find you, George? Any last thoughts or anything at all? But where can people find you?
You just type my name in the internet. I'm usually the first thing that comes up. You can find me on X that way too, or podcasts and stuff, or find my art. I tell you, that's another thing. The last thing I'll say is this, is that, one of the things we didn't discuss, and it's really important, is that if I'm right about AI and that it's not going away and it's going to continue, then on the other side, in a few years, you are going to see an incredible deflationary impulse across this society. Things are going to get cheaper. Now, surprisingly enough, I have a case that I can make for why Bitcoin will become one of the most valuable commodities to own during that period. But that's a fairly deep conversation. What I do want to say is this, is that if we end up with universal basic income, or as Musk recently said in a podcast, universal high income, meaning basically you're going to have enough services, UBI and UBS, that you can live a very nice life, then you're going to have to think what it means to have purpose in life. And if you look, I'm sure you'll show a big widescreen version of my studio here. I have a purpose in life. I am creating things that give me a lot of joy. They give other people joy. And when I do fall over and I go over the river Styx by myself, you know what? I will leave memories behind, but I'll leave my work behind too. And some of these paintings I have, they'll be here for hundreds of years. And they're of the kind of quality that somebody's not just going to throw them away in the garbage can, because most people's most things that you think are important are usually gone within the third generation after you. The third generation is the one that comes along and usually throws out your beer can collection or some other nonsense like that. So think about what it is that gives you purpose after we're done here today, and just have a quiet moment to yourself and think to yourself, what is I want to do in life? What have I always wanted to be? What is it that gives me joy? And then go out there and kick some ass and get it.
Well, Jethro, George, Bodine, everyone, just appreciate you. Godspeed to you. It's an incredible time to be alive. Like you said, I could not agree more. Look forward to seeing you soon. That's for sure.
Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it. Great talk, and everybody have a great day.
If you like that episode, then you're going to love the playlist we put together for you with our most recent podcast with the top Bitcoiners, sound money, liberty advocates in the world. Go check those out here. We'll see you inside. You're going to love them.